My name is Bob Garner and I work for Ampco Pumps, and today I'm going to show you how to disassemble and reassemble the Ampco cb+ centrifugal pumps made for the brewery industry. In addition, I'm going to talk about the 3 different ways we see seal failures, particularly on hot wort. So we're going to start by taking off the seal guard. That's a 7/16" wrench. Next, casing clamp. And then the casing. And at this point, sometimes the casing takes a little bit of a knock to get it off because of the seal between the gasket and the casing. So the stub shaft has a 3/8" hole, and that's used to insert 3/8" bolt in there to hold the stub shaft while you loosen the impeller nuts. So the impeller is spring loaded from the seal spring. You're going to have to hold that in. Remove the nut. Behind the nut is the impeller nut gasket. You're going to need a pick probably to get in there and get that off. And then off comes the impeller. The impellers have a keyway in them. Next, pull off the shaft spring. There's another gasket located behind the impeller. And the shaft key. So the back plate is held on by 2 hooks and 2 pins. You're going to want to turn this maybe 10, 20 degrees. And at this point, you're going to want to carefully pull that back plate off and try not to bang the seals that are inside against the shaft. So keep it concentric and gently pull it off. Inside the back plate is the rotating seal that consists of a protection washer and an O-ring. You're handling seals, you want to place them seal face side up. And inside the back plate is what we call the stationary seal face. So one of the modes where we see failure in hot wort is when seals are operating normally, the product inside the pump is on the seal faces and helps lubricate it. So when we have one rotating, one stationary, and there's product on the seal faces to help lubricate it. When we're pumping hot wort and you turn the pump off without cleaning it or running a rinse through it, that wort will build up on the seal faces. It'll dry and build up on the seal faces and eventually push them apart where you're going to have leakage. So we recommend after you do a run is to rinse the pump. Either with a cold water rinse or better yet a hot water rinse to get that wort off the seal faces. The second mode of failure we see is when you're running wort above 200 degrees Fahrenheit, it's near its boiling point, and that wort will vaporize on the seal faces and they will essentially run dry. A dry running seal face will wear quicker and you'll eventually damage the seal faces and you will have leakage. So one way to alleviate that is to bring the temperature of the wort down if you can. Or we have some customers that cascade water onto the seal area, which spills onto the floor, but it cools the seal area. The downside is you're going to have to recapture that spilt water somehow and dispose of it. And then the third failure is handling issues. Both these seal faces are very brittle. If you drop them, if you bang them against the shaft, installing it or taking it off, you will chip, crack, or shatter them. So careful handling is very important. So now the assembly, I'm going to do it in the reverse order. And I'm going to lubricate the O-ring on the stationary seal with some food grade lubricant. And then just push this back into its cavity. And at this point, I'm going to want to wipe that seal face from any lubricant that might have got on there or fingerprints. And then the rotating face, I'm going to put the O-ring in. And the protection washer. And I'm also going to lubricate this O-ring. So the back plate, important not to, as I mentioned earlier, not to bang it against the shaft. Carefully load that, bring it in, and get the hooks to engage. I'm going to take our rotary face, which I've lubricated. And at this point, I'm going to want to wipe off the face. I'm going to install the spring. The spring has a hook on it, which corresponds to a notch in the seal face. And we're using the spring to push it on to the shaft. Put the seal in, pull the spring back out. Now we're going to put on our shaft gasket behind the impeller gasket. And then our shaft key. We're going to reinstall the spring. Make sure that's in the notch in the seal. And you may need to reposition the gasket once you put the spring in using your pick. It may fall out of place. So next, we're going to install the impeller and make sure that the impeller notch is in line with the keyway. And sometimes you have to hold the key down with the pick. It tends to want to walk up a little bit. Get that on. Put the gasket back on the impeller nut. So the difference between our standard C-Series, which is used in the dairy industry and food processing, the standard C-Series has an external seal. The CB+ was developed with an internal seal, meaning the seal faces and the spring is in the product zone. That helps it run a little bit cooler than an external seal. So with this hot wort applications, 180, 185 Fahrenheit, an internal seal will run cooler than an external. That's the difference between the two pumps. So once we have the nut snugged down, we're going to want to torque it. First we put in our bolt to hold the shaft from turning. And that depends on the pump size and the motor size. So you want to look in your manual for the specific torque values for your model and motor size. Torque that down. Now the casing goes on, and you want to make sure your discharge is in the right orientation. Some of our customers have them at a 45, some of them are horizontal, most are vertical. Make sure that's square with the horizon. And you want to make sure that this gap here is even all the way around. Install your casing clamp. I usually give it a little bit of a knock with the mallet at this point. And as I'm tightening the wing nut, I kind of wrap it with the mallet, make sure everything's seated. This wing nut should only need to be hand tight. Once that is done, our seal guard goes back into place. Tighten that up. And that concludes our presentation.